The first time I saw Ethan Caldwell, he was sneering at me across a crowded high school cafeteria, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Freak!" he spat, and the word landed like a fist, bruising something deep inside me. I was 16, a scrawny kid named Lucas Tran, just trying to survive the gauntlet of adolescence in small-town Indiana. Back then, I didn't have the words to describe who I was. I only knew I felt wrong, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong slot. Ethan, with his broad shoulders and quarterback swagger, seemed to sense it too. He made it his mission to remind me daily, shoving me into lockers, mocking my quiet voice, turning my existence into a minefield. I hated him. I hated the way his blue eyes glinted with cruelty, the way his laugh haunted my nightmares. But more than that, I hated how his words made me question myself, made me wonder if I deserved the pain. 10 years later, I stood in a San Francisco bookstore, signing copies of my first novel, a quiet story about a boy finding his place in a world that didn't want him. The line was short but steady, mostly college kids and a few curious locals. Then I saw him, Ethan, older now, his jaw still sharp but his eyes softer, carrying a copy of my book. My heart stopped. The room spun. I wanted to run, to scream, to demand why he was here, tainting the one place I felt safe. Instead, I forced a smile and took the book from his trembling hands. "I owe you an apology," he said, voice low, almost breaking. "I was a monster back then. I didn't know how to deal with myself, so I took it out on you." His words hung in the air, heavy with regret. I stared at him, searching for the boy who'd tormented me, but all I saw was a man unraveling, his vulnerability raw and disarming. I didn't forgive him that day, couldn't, but I let him talk, let him explain how he'd spent years wrestling with his own identity, his own shame. He'd been closeted, terrified, lashing out to hide his truth. I listened, my anger warring with something softer, something I didn't want to name. When he left, he slipped a piece of paper into my book with his number scrawled on it. "If you ever want to talk," he said. I threw it away, but I memorized the digits. That night I couldn't sleep. Ethan's face kept flickering in my mind. Not the cruel sneer of our teenage years, but the way his eyes had softened, the way his voice cracked when he apologized. I told myself it didn't matter. I'd built a life without him, a good one. I had my writing, my friends, a small apartment in the Mission District with a view of the fog rolling in. I didn't need him dragging me back to the past. But the past has a way of clawing its way back. A week later, I saw him at a coffee shop in the Castro, laughing with a group of friends. He looked different, lighter, like he'd shed a weight I hadn't noticed he was carrying. Our eyes met, and he froze, then smiled, tentative but warm. Against my better judgment, I walked over. We talked for hours about nothing and everything. His job as a graphic designer, my next book, the way San Francisco felt like a second chance. He didn't push, didn't ask for forgiveness again. He just listened, and for the first time I felt seen by him not as a target but as a person. We started meeting up. Coffee turned into dinners, dinners into walks along the Embarcadero. I kept waiting for the catch, for the moment he'd reveal the old Ethan, the one who'd made me feel small. But he never did. Instead, he showed me sketches he'd drawn, told me stories about his family, his struggles coming out, the years he'd spent trying to make amends. I told him about my own journey, how I'd come out in college, how writing saved me, how I still woke up some nights hearing his voice from a decade ago. One evening, as we sat on a bench watching the bay, he reached for my hand. I flinched, instinct kicking in, but he didn't pull away. "I'm not that guy anymore, Lucas," he said softly. I want to be someone you can trust. My chest tightened, a mix of fear and longing. I didn't pull my hand away. Our first kiss was on that same cliff in Big Sur months later. The wind was wild, tugging at our clothes, but Ethan's arms around me felt like an anchor. I never felt so safe, so whole. Terrified me. How could I love someone who'd once broken me? How could I trust this feeling when it came from him? But every time I doubted, he was there. Steady, patient, proving himself in small ways. He cooked me dinner when I was stressed, left notes in my books, held me when I cried about the father who'd never accepted me. We moved in together a year later, in a tiny apartment with creaky floors and a view of the Golden Gate Bridge. Our life wasn't perfect. We fought about money, about my tendency to shut down, about his fear of not being enough. But we always came back to each other. He'd hold me at night, his breath warm against my neck, and I'd wonder how we'd gotten here, how pain could turn into this. When he proposed, it was quiet, just us on our balcony with a bottle of wine. He didn't have a ring, just a promise. I want to spend my life making it up to you, he said, tears in his eyes, and loving you the way you deserve. I said yes, not because I'd forgotten the past, but because I believed in the man he'd become. Our wedding was small, just close friends and my sister, who'd flown in from Chicago. We stood under an oak tree in a park, the Bay Area breeze carrying the scent of eucalyptus. I wore a simple suit, Ethan a flannel shirt that made me laugh because it was so him. When he said his vows, his voice shook, but his eyes never left mine. I was lost once, he said. You showed me how to find myself. I'll spend every day showing you how much that means. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive the boy he was. Some wounds don't heal. They just scar over. But the man he is now, the one who holds me at night, who makes me laugh, who loves me fiercely, that man is my home. And that's enough. The first year of our marriage was a tightrope walk between bliss and doubt. Ethan and I were learning each other in ways we hadn't before. How he left dishes in the sink but always made the bed. How I'd retreat into silence when I was scared. Our apartment, with its mismatched furniture and walls covered in Ethan's sketches, felt like a sanctuary, but the ghosts of our past still lingered. I'd catch myself watching him sometimes, waiting for the old Ethan to resurface. A sharp word, a careless laugh. Anything that might prove this was all a mistake. One night, after a long day of deadlines, I snapped at him over something small, a forgotten grocery list. His face fell, and for a moment, I saw the boy from high school, the one who'd made me feel invisible. I'm trying, Lucas, he said quietly, and the hurt in his voice cut deeper than any insult from our past. We didn't talk for hours. I sat on the couch, staring at my laptop, the words of my next novel refusing to come. Ethan went for a walk, something he did when he needed to think. When he came back, he sat beside me, close but not touching. I know I hurt you back then, he said, and I know you're scared I'll do it again, but I'm not going anywhere. I love you, and I'll keep proving it. I wanted to argue, to push him away, but instead, I leaned into him, letting his warmth anchor me. Work became my escape when things felt too raw. My second novel was due, and the pressure was suffocating. Ethan, meanwhile, was thriving at his design firm, landing a big project for a local nonprofit. He'd come home buzzing with ideas, sketching late into the night. I loved watching him work, the way his brow furrowed, his hands moving with purpose. But I envied it too, his ability to lose himself in something so completely. One evening, he showed me a logo he'd designed for a youth center supporting queer teens. It was simple but striking, a rainbow spiral that felt like hope. "I want to do more of this," he said, eyes bright. "Work that matters. Like what you do with your books." His words caught me off guard. I'd never thought of my writing that way, as something that could change lives. But Ethan saw me in a way I was still learning to see myself. That night, we talked about starting something together. A project to help kids like us, the ones who'd felt alone, who'd faced bullies or worse. It was a dream, vague but electric, and it felt like a new chapter. We stayed up until dawn, sketching ideas, laughing, dreaming. For the first time, I felt like we were building something bigger than ourselves. But dreams don't pay the bills. Ethan's project hit a snag when the nonprofit's funding fell through, and my novel was rejected by my publisher for being too quiet. We were stretched thin emotionally and financially. Arguments became sharper, more frequent. I'd retreat to my writing nook, a corner of our bedroom with a desk and a flickering lamp. Ethan would pace, his frustration filling the apartment like static. One night, it boiled over. "You act like I'm the problem," he said, voice raised. "Like I'm still the guy who hurt you. I'm trying, Lucas, but you keep holding the past over me." I froze, his words slicing through me. He wasn't wrong. I'd been keeping score, tallying every moment he fell short, as if it could protect me from being hurt again. "I don't know how to stop," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I want to trust you, but part of me is still scared." Ethan crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled me into his arms. "Then let me help you," he said. "We'll figure it out together." We stood there, holding each other, the weight of our past and our love pressing against us in equal measure. The next morning, Ethan suggested we take a weekend away, just the 2 of us. We drove to Mendocino, a quiet coastal town with cliffs and redwoods. The air was crisp, the kind that makes you feel alive. We walked along the headlands, hand in hand, the ocean roaring below. Ethan talked about his childhood, about the father who'd expected him to be someone he wasn't, about the fear that had driven him to hurt others. I told him about my own family, how my dad had stopped speaking to me after I came out, how my sister was the only one who'd shown up to our wedding. We didn't solve everything that weekend, but we found a rhythm. We laughed more, touched more, let ourselves be vulnerable. On the last night, as we sat by a bonfire on the beach, Ethan pulled me close. "I don't deserve you," he said, his voice thick, "but I'm so damn grateful you're here." I kissed him, tasting salt and smoke, and for the first time, I believed we could outrun our past. The idea for the youth center took root in Mendocino and grew faster than either of us expected. We called it Haven, a place for queer kids to feel safe, to find community. Ethan threw himself into the design, logos, murals, a website that felt warm and welcoming. I started writing grant proposals, drawing on my skills as a novelist to tell stories that would convince donors to believe in us. It was exhilarating, but it was also terrifying. We were betting everything, our savings, our time, our fragile hope, on this dream. We found a small space in Oakland, a rundown storefront with peeling paint and a leaky roof. Ethan saw potential where I saw problems. "We'll make it ours," he said, already sketching plans for a cozy library corner and a mural of bright, swirling colors. I nodded, trying to match his optimism, but doubt gnawed at me. What if we failed? What if we couldn't make a difference? Our first big win came when a local foundation granted us enough to cover renovations. Ethan worked alongside the contractors, painting walls and hauling furniture, his flannel shirts streaked with sweat and sawdust. I handled the paperwork, the meetings, the endless emails. We were exhausted, but we were together, and that made it bearable. At night, we'd collapse on the couch, sharing takeout and stories about the kids we hope to help. Kids like the ones we'd been, lost and scared but full of potential. The opening of Haven was chaotic. We'd planned for 50 people, but over 100 showed up. Teens, parents, community leaders. I gave a speech, my voice shaking as I talked about what it meant to have a place where you could be yourself. Ethan stood in the back, beaming, his eyes never leaving me. Afterward, a shy kid named Jamie, maybe 15, approached me. "I read your book," he said, clutching a worn copy. "It made me feel less alone." I hugged him, tears stinging my eyes, and realized this was why we'd done it. But success came with pressure. Haven needed staff, programs, more funding. Ethan and I were stretched thin, juggling our day jobs and the center. I started missing deadlines for my novel, and Ethan's freelance work slowed as he poured himself into Haven. We argued about priorities, about money, about who was carrying more of the load. One night, I found him sitting alone in the dark at Haven, staring at the mural he'd painted. A vibrant spiral of colors that seemed to pulse with life. "I'm scared we're losing us," he said, his voice hollow. "This place is everything, but you're more." I sat beside him, our shoulders touching. "We're not losing us," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "We just need to find balance." He nodded, but the worry in his eyes lingered. A crisis hit 3 months later. A pipe burst, flooding the library and ruining half our books. The repair costs were astronomical, and our budget was already stretched. I felt like I was drowning, the weight of Haven and our marriage pressing down on me. Ethan, ever the optimist, rallied volunteers to clean up, but I could see the strain in his face, the way his smile didn't reach his eyes. We fought that night, our worst yet. "You act like this is all on you," Ethan snapped. "I'm here too, Lucas. I'm trying." I wanted to scream that trying wasn't enough, that I was tired of carrying the past and the present. Instead, I walked out, needing air, needing space. I wandered the streets of Oakland, the city's pulse a stark contrast to the chaos in my head. I thought about the boy Ethan had been, the man he was now, and the life we were building. Was it worth it? Could we survive this? When I got home, Ethan was waiting, his eyes red. "I thought you weren't coming back," he said, his voice breaking. I crossed the room and kissed him, fierce and desperate. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "But we need help. We can't do this alone." He nodded, pulling me close, and we held each other like we were the only thing keeping the world from falling apart. We reached out to the community, and they showed up. Volunteers rebuilt the library, local authors donated books, and a queer-owned bookstore hosted a fundraiser. Haven came back stronger, and so did we. Ethan and I started therapy, learning to talk through the fear and the pain. It wasn't easy. Some days I still saw the boy who'd hurt me, and Ethan still carried the guilt of that boy. But we were trying together. One night, as we lay in bed, Ethan traced circles on my back. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Marrying me?" I turned to face him, his eyes searching mine in the dark. "No," I said, and I meant it. "You're my home." He smiled, pulling me close, and for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming of the past. Was heavy, his handwriting shaky. "I've been reading your books," he wrote. "I don't understand you, but I'm trying." It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was something. I showed it to Ethan, expecting him to be as cautious as I was. Instead, he grinned. "That's a start, Lucas. People can change." His words stung, not because they were wrong, but because they forced me to confront my own doubts. I'd forgiven Ethan, mostly, but I still held pieces of the past like armor. Could I let them go? Could I believe in change, not just for him, but for my father, for myself? That night, I wrote a response to my dad, short but honest, inviting him to visit Haven. I didn't expect him to come, but I sent it anyway. Ethan's optimism was tested when his own past resurfaced. His high school best friend, Mike, reached out wanting to reconnect. Mike had been part of the group that tormented me, egging Ethan on. I didn't trust him, but Ethan wanted to give him a chance. "He's different now," Ethan said, but I heard the uncertainty in his voice. We met Mike for dinner in San Francisco, a tense affair at a dim sum restaurant. He was all smiles, talking about his job, his kids, but I couldn't shake the memory of his laughter as Ethan shoved me into a locker. Halfway through the meal, Mike apologized, his words clumsy but sincere. "I was an idiot back then," he said. "I didn't know what I was doing to you." I nodded, unable to speak, my throat tight with old anger and new hope. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table, grounding me. Later, as we walked home, he said, "You didn't have to forgive him, you know." I looked at him, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "I didn't," I said, "but I'm trying. For you." He kissed me, soft and slow, and I felt the weight of the past shift, just a little. Haven's first anniversary was a celebration of survival. We threw a party, complete with music, food, and a new mural Ethan had painted. A tree with roots deep in the earth and branches reaching for the sky. Kids shared their stories, their art, their dreams. Jamie read a poem he'd written, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. I looked at Ethan, standing among the kids, and saw the man I loved, not the boy I'd feared. But the night wasn't perfect. My father didn't show, despite my invitation. I tried to hide my disappointment, but Ethan saw through me. "He'll come around," he said, pulling me into a hug. "Or he won't. But you've got me, and you've got this place." I nodded, burying my face in his chest, letting his heartbeat steady mine. The next morning, we got a call from the foundation. They wanted to fund a second location for Haven, this time in Sacramento. It was a dream come true, but it meant more work, more stress. Ethan and I sat at our kitchen table, spreadsheets and coffee mugs scattered between us, debating whether we could handle it. "We're stronger than we think," Ethan said, his hand over mine. I wanted to believe him, but the fear was still there, whispering that we'd break under the pressure. We said yes to the new location, diving into another whirlwind of planning. Ethan took on the design, sketching late into the night, while I wrote grants and recruited staff. We were tired, but we were a team, leaning on each other in ways we hadn't before. One evening, as we worked side by side at Haven, Ethan paused, his pencil hovering over a sketch. "I'm proud of us," he said, his voice soft but sure. I looked at him, at the man who'd once been my nightmare, and felt a surge of love so fierce it scared me. "I'm proud of you," I said, and for the first time, I didn't hear the echo of the past. We kissed, the world fading to just us, the hum of Haven around us like a heartbeat. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew we'd face it together. The Sacramento location opened with less chaos than the first, but it stretched us to our limits. Ethan and I were splitting our time between cities, driving back and forth, our lives a blur of meetings and late-night calls. Haven was thriving, but I could feel the cracks forming. Not in the centers, but in us. We were so focused on saving others that we forgot to save ourselves. One night, I woke to find Ethan gone from our bed. I found him on the balcony, staring at the city lights, his sketchbook untouched beside him. I'm scared I'm not enough, he said, his voice barely audible. For you, for Haven, for any of this. I sat beside him, the night air cold against my skin. You're enough, I said, but I knew he didn't believe me. I didn't always believe it myself. We started carving out time for each other. Small moments to reconnect. A coffee date, a walk in the park, a quiet night with no talk of work. It wasn't enough to fix everything, but it was a start. I began writing again, not for deadlines but for myself, pouring my fears and hopes into stories. Ethan went back to sketching, his art becoming bolder, more honest. We were finding our way back to each other, one step at a time. My father showed up unannounced one afternoon at Haven's Oakland location. I was in the middle of a writing workshop when I saw him standing in the doorway, his face older, softer. He didn't say much, just listened as the kids read their work. Afterward, he pulled me aside. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice gruff. I don't understand all of this, but I see what you're doing. It wasn't the reconciliation I dreamed of, but it was enough for now. I called Ethan, my voice shaking as I told him. I knew he'd come around, Ethan said, and I could hear his smile through the phone. That moment gave us both a boost, a reminder of why we'd started Haven. We threw ourselves back into the work, but with a new rule: no neglecting us. We took weekends off, went on hikes, cooked together. Ethan started leaving sketches around the apartment, little love notes in pencil and ink. I wrote him poems, tucking them into his sketchbook. We were rebuilding not just Haven but our marriage. The second anniversary of Haven was a milestone. We held a joint celebration for both locations, with kids from Oakland and Sacramento sharing their art and stories. Jamie, now 16, performed a spoken-word piece about finding his voice, and I saw Ethan wipe away a tear. We'd done this, created a space where kids could heal, where they could be themselves. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. That night, as we cleaned up after the party, Ethan pulled me into a slow dance in the empty library. There was no music, just the hum of the city outside, but it was enough. I love you, he said, his forehead against mine. I always will. I kissed him, my heart full, the scars of our past still there but softer, less sharp. Years later, we're still running Haven, still fighting for the kids who need it most. We've opened a third location, this time in Portland, and we're planning a fourth. Ethan's murals are in every center, bursts of color that make people smile. My novels are doing better, telling stories of hope and resilience. We're not perfect, we still argue, still doubt, still carry the weight of our past. But we're together, and that's what matters. Every night, Ethan holds me, his arms a reminder that love can rewrite even the darkest chapters. I think about the boy who made my life hell, the man who changed it, and the life we've built from the ashes. It's not a fairy tale, but it's ours, and it's enough.